How do I get my legs up? Ugh. How do I get my legs up? If you keep trying over and over and over again to get your legs up on the surface of the water, but it seems like no matter what you try, it just doesn't work, that sounds like you, we have the solution. The promise I want to make you guys is if the information that we deliver in the video doesn't end up working for you, you try it, you go to the pool, it doesn't work, I would invite you to send me a 30-second to 1-minute clip of you swimming. That way I can get my eyes on what's going on and I can deliver a lot more specific feedback. The only thing that I would ask is if you send me that clip, that you would allow me to post that live on one of our videos. And that way I would be happily do it for free. You can send that over to jeff@caribeswim.com. That's Jeff at CARIBE swim.com. There's 3 main areas that we need to focus on when we're talking about getting our legs up to the surface. And they're all different solutions based on what one of the 3 we're struggling with. So the first one is a static front float. Number 2 is a static back float. And then number 3 is while we're moving with forward propulsion. And for most of us, the issue is going to be on our front. So let's start with number 1, a static front float. There's a couple of reasons for this. Reason number 1 is tension in the body. And universally, I think this applies to the most number of you. If you're tension in the body usually presents itself for one of 2 reasons. 1, we had an experience growing up that caused fear or anxiety around learning to swim. And today that presents itself as tension in the body, which causes density. Whenever we think about trying to learn how to swim, our body starts going into fight or flight mode. Now, we're not always going to be totally aware that this is happening. This might be somewhat subconscious, but that's one of the reasons this might happen. The other is if we're worried about what might happen in the future. For example, what happens when I put my face in? Am I going to choke on water? What happens if I float, my legs get all the way up to the surface, and then I don't know how to get back down? I've heard that from a lot of adults, especially in the classes that I've taught, where they come in thinking that they're not able to float, and then they float so well that ends up causing anxiety. So these are real issues. And those tend to be the 2 reasons why we carry tension in our body. Tension causes density, so this is the most likely reason why your legs aren't coming up to the surface. Reason number 2 is our fat to muscle ratio. So if you are a very muscular human being and you carry a lot of your muscle mass in your legs, muscle is much more dense than fat, and that makes it very, very difficult, especially in a static position, for us to achieve legs up on the surface of the water. The truth is that not everyone is going to be, or even has to achieve, in our head, what we would think of as a perfect front float. Each one of us has a unique front float that when we work out all of the tension in our body, so we're 100% comfortable or 100% confident, a lot of what happens next is reliant on our fat to muscle ratio. All right, and so if some of us might not be able to achieve that fully, the good news is that when we start to add forward propulsion, a lot of that issue will start to go away. Reason number 3 is our head position, and I've covered this at detail, but let me cover it a little bit more. So imagine that my hand here, okay, is my head, and this is my body, okay? When our head goes up, our legs have to go down, all right? Our head weighs a lot. And when our head is in a more vertical position, that puts a lot of stress on the rest of the body. It's called uphill swimming because we're kind of plowing water, for lack of a better term. And so we want to make sure that when we're doing any sort of float, front float, back float, or forward propulsion, that our spine is in complete alignment. Like, for example, turn the camera around, Meredith here, our beautiful number 2, She can't achieve what we would think of as a perfect static front float. She's got very muscular legs. She's an avid Spiro free diver and uses her legs all the time. Because of that, they're just more dense than the average set of legs. All right, so number 2 is back floating, and the same principles hold true. Tension in the body, especially on our back, exacerbates this issue. If we have any amount of fear, anxiety, apprehension, and tension, which leads to tension in the body, there's just no way we're going to be able to back float. And so this has to be a really introspective process where we sit down and we're very intentional about thinking about our past and asking ourselves, are we 100%, not 90%, not 80%, not 95%, 100% comfortable with what we're doing? And if the answer is no, we need to really be conscious of the fact that we should be taking a step back. And if you guys want much more detail on how to overcome this and ensure that you're successful, I highly recommend signing up for the Learn to Swim 101 course, because it's this kind of analysis times 10. But nonetheless, in addition to tension in the body, head position really reigns true. All right, which is one of the most common things that adults tend to do is they like to look at their toes. And that's natural because, and this is one of the things that's different about back floating than front floating, we don't like getting water in our ears. And I covered this in the Learn How to Back Float video earlier this month. But it's an uncomfortable feeling getting water in our ears. And because of that, we tend to lift our head up more and we want to be looking at our toes. Well, we look at our toes. We don't want to look at our toes, but we do that as a way to prevent getting our ears wet. The reality is that for us to achieve a perfect back float to the extent that we can, based on our fat to muscle ratio too, we got to keep our spine in alignment. All right, and the only way we can do that is putting our head back in the water and actually having a slightly backwards trajectory with our eyes. The final thing that is very, very relevant to back floating is our ability to get a full breath. When our lungs are filled with air, we're very, very buoyant in the water. And when they're not, whoop, we sink down. And I've covered that at length too. So those are really kind of the aspects, the variables that help us in a static position achieve our natural front float. Now keep in mind, based on our fat to muscle ratio, some of us are not going to be able to, in a static position, to achieve our legs up subconsciously what we think of as a perfect back float. And the third and final way that we want to think about trying to get our feet up is when we're doing forward propulsion. And the one I really want to cover the most here is when we're on our stomach, just because that's the most applicable to the most number of people. So, swimming freestyle or swimming what we would consider similar to a breaststroke. So that is what we're going to talk about inside of this. Here are the things we have to consider. We've really touched on every single one of them. The primary one is tension in the body. We've got to be 100% relaxed. And this is a major problem for a lot of new swimmers. The idea of moving in the water is a brand new feeling, right? We're so used to moving in space, in air, that when we start to move in space in water, which is substantially more dense than air, we're not used to it. And some of the things that can happen is we start to feel the waves and we start to rock a little bit back and forth. And these are all things that add to our anxiety level. When our anxiety level starts to peak, we're in fight or flight. What happens? Tension in the body, everything starts to fall apart. And so if this sounds like you, we just need to take a step back and go into it very slowly. I can't stress enough, Meredith has covered this at length too. When we're learning how to swim, this is not a forced exercise or experience. We do not want to go beyond what we're comfortable doing. We always want to stay within our comfort zone so that we can utilize the beautiful properties of water that help hold us up instead of fight against it just to try to get from point A to point B. All right, so that's number one. Number two is head position, and very relevant. I would say more than 95% of brand new swimmers want to see where they're going when they're swimming. All right, that means if we're swimming towards this wall, we're lifting our chin up. right? You want to see where you're going. There's nothing on the bottom most of the time. It's just a white bottom in this pool. So we're going to lift our head up to see where we're going. And I've covered this in our static float. This is problematic. All right. And so if we're going to do that, we got to do it quickly and immediately go back into having our spine in alignment. Outside of that, maintaining, and this is a big topic, we covered it in the blowing bubbles video. The amount of air that we're able to retain in our lungs is very, very important as we start to add in forward propulsion. Anytime that your face is in the water and you're a brand new swimmer, we should be holding onto our air, okay? There is a time and a place to blow bubbles. The time and place is not now, all right? If we're a little bit more seasoned, well, that's a video for another day. The goal of this is to help our brand new swimmers really achieve what it feels like to comfortably add forward propulsion, and to do so by getting their legs up to the top of the water. Some other kind of tiny tips and tricks you can do, or you can flex a little bit of your core to try to pull the legs up. This is a more advanced technique, and so if you think you're 100% relaxed, your head position is in order, you know you're not tense at all, and none of those things are working, then you can try that. Outside of that, we can also think about, watch the kicking video we just did and buoyancy, where we talk about how we kick. One of the issues that might be keeping you from having your feet come up to the top of the water is just incorrect kicking technique as well. So if there's any way I can support you in achieving either a perfect front float, back float, or forward propulsion, send me a video. Happy to analyze it, as long as we can post it up. That way the group and all of us here trying to learn how to swim can benefit from the analysis. Thank you guys so much. Make sure to subscribe to our page, like our video, click the little bell. That way you get notified every single time we put out a new video that'll help you learn how to swim. See you guys at the next one.